Well, today I'm working on the M37. I've got a leaky wheel cylinder seal for the brakes, where you can see there's some fluid here where it's leaking, and the cylinder's right up there. But in order to get at it, you got to pull this drum off. They're actually rather simple once you get in there, but everything on these is massive. So it can be hard to take apart, particularly like this one. Now, when I bought this vehicle, though it's a 1954, it had under 1,000 miles on it. So these have never been off since 1954. So they can be tricky. The brake drum is held on, well, in the first place, I'll say these lug bolts on these are, on this side, are left-handed threads. You know, Dodge used to be into that sort of thing. It later proved that it really made no difference, but they're that way on here, so you have to know that. You know, and they're a big lug nut. Well, everything on this thing is big. Now, the way these are set up is a little unusual. You know, this is the drive axle. It doesn't have lockouts, but this can be replaced and lockouts put in there, which is something I should do because it would save a lot of wear and tear in the drivetrain and save a little fuel. But I hate to change things unless I have to. What I'm doing now, though, is just pulling the drum off. Now, there's 3 little screws that hold that drum on. Now, in theory, you used to be able to take a screwdriver, just turn them off, because they really don't do anything but hold the drum so that when you pull a tire off, the drum doesn't fall off, you know, because it's really lined up on these, but these screws actually hold it in there. Well, now, these haven't been apart, ever. So, I've been through this before, and I heat them, then I try them with this, but I've only had one time it was successful getting the screw out. Normally, what I end up doing is drilling them screws out. You know, this is what the screw looks like. I'll drill down. Now this one, when I got down to that point, it came loose. You know, the heat was enough to break it loose. Normally, you end up drilling them, drill the head off completely, then you can unscrew it from the inside. You know, because then the drum will come off. But, like I say, one time I had one come loose with just that impact. Normally, it's a drill deal. Like I say, because they haven't been apart. But all they do is really hold the drum on. So, I have tried all of these with the impact. None of them are budging. So, I will now just go ahead and drill them heads off. Get at it that way. Well, I got those 3 out. One of them I drilled and the head snapped off, and that bolt is still in there. 2 of them, when I got down to the bolt itself, they spun out. So that's good, but they're easy enough to get. You know, it isn't a blind thing. Once you get in there, you can easily back it out. But now the drum can come off. And for that, you put in 3 3/8" push bolts. And run them with the impact. Rather evenly, because that's probably enough. Tight. But that'll pull the drum off. Yeah, I'm just running out of battery. That was close. I got another battery. Now the drum will just fall right off. Now, I'm going to take some gas and clean that brake fluid off. But like here's that bolt I said that broke off. Well, that just spins off there now. But these are huge bearings in here. There's another way of getting this apart where you actually pull the axle out, take the bearings off, and you can pull it out. But this is the way it's designed to come off. That would only be if you had a disaster. Well, I'll go ahead and clean this up and then I'll explain. Well, I'll explain it now. These, like I say, they're simple in design, complicated to set up. There's a pivot bolt down here on each end of the shoe, and that's how the shoe is actually adjusted. They're different in that this is two different sizes on the brake cylinder. It isn't one bore all the way through. There's a small one and a big one. But I'll go ahead and pull this apart, then I'll explain that. I've got a lot of cleaning to do. But this on here isn't oil, it's brake fluid, so I can clean that off with gas. And that should be fine, because they're actually still good shoes. Well, like I say, low miles. But these seals have been on there since 1954, so it isn't surprising that they leak. Like I said, I've been through this on the back before, so I'm familiar with it, and I happen to have spare seals. So I'll go ahead and clean this up and pull it apart. Getting this spring that holds the two shoes together can be a fight. There's a tool for it. I actually have one, but I don't know where it's at the moment. I haven't used it for so long. I can usually get in there and pry it off with a screwdriver. And then there's these little restraining clips that hold the shoe back, but they just pop out of there. They're fairly strong though. You got to pry them out to get them back in. Now once you get the shoes out of the way, okay, this is just a dust cover. This is the actual piston. And here is the small cup. But like I said, this has got two different sizes. So you have to be a little careful. You know, this dust cover's got a tear in it, but that's all right. I have replacements. Okay, you see this piston, and this side 1 3/8, this side 1 1/4. Now the reasoning behind that is, you know, the wheel is turning this way. They want the most pressure going with the rotation. So this side actually pushes harder than what this side does. I think it's to keep chatter down. But it's one of them things that they did and then they quit doing. Okay, that back one looks all right. Yeah, this one is shot. I can see marks on it. Now all I'm going to do, yeah, that's where she was leaking, is holding the cylinder out. It's a little tricky in that it is a step cylinder, but I'll hold that out with a regular brake cylinder hone. Then I'll replace both. So like I said, the back one looks good, so that'll go into my spares. But I do have the regular military kit that it's the seal and dust covers. And you know, I buy this kind of stuff anytime I run across it because it's always good to have. Would you get the two different dust covers? Well, the dust covers are both the same for either side, but the actual cups are different. That whole thing drives people nuts sometimes. I saw somebody on a video the one time just beating the crap out of it trying to get that piston out because the piston was stuck. And he didn't realize that it has to go a certain direction. But they're stepped, so you know, they should never be that stuck. But if a vehicle's been sitting for a long time, I could see where it could happen. But that's all there is to it. You do have to remember when you put them back in, this little tab on the shoe actually is supposed to go into that slot. But that's all. So now it's a lot of cleaning, a little honing, and I'll slap her back together. And I won't be putting these screws back in. I'll actually just leave them off altogether. They really don't need to be there because the drum is aligned onto the bolts. These are just to keep the drum from coming off, working loose if you should pull your wheel off. You know, I don't have anything like this. I'll have to order some of them and then I'll replace them, but they don't need to be in there. And they're just a nuisance if they've been in there too long. So that's about it. Just clean up and reassembly. Blake bleeder screws back here. I know somebody had asked me about how to bleed the brakes on these, and it really isn't that difficult. The only thing about these, it's a single master cylinder, so if you lose brakes, you lose all your brakes. However, these have, on the drive line, the emergency brake is actually an emergency brake. If you lose your wheel brakes, that breaks the drive shaft. So you can use that regular brake to get back from wherever you are. You can actually lock up the back wheels with that brake. Cars originally had brakes that ran with a lever, linkage and band. So, it's not a fatal deal if you lose brakes, but bleeder screws back here, and the way I bleed them, I'll pump the brakes up, then I've got a stick that I cut that fits between the steering wheel and the brake pedal, which I always keep in the back, because then that'll keep pressure on. Otherwise you need a second person to run it, or one of the vacuum systems to pull it through. But this is the way I've always done it. Well, we used to, that's when we were kids, you always had somebody else to pump the brakes. If not, you have to go to the house and get Ma and tell Ma to hold the brake pedal. Then she was good for that, but now I've got her stick to replace her. But that's all there is to it. I'll put her all back together. Not a big job, but I think it intimidates a lot of people, and a lot of these have been sitting around for a long time. Well, I got it all back together. I ran the drum back on using a couple nuts just to pull it tight. Now I pumped the brakes up, put my Ma stick in there. Now to bleed it, the 7/16 on the back, but a lot of times they're boogered up. And if they are, you can usually tap an 11mm on them. But then you just pump it up, block it so it holds, then open it, you can feel it bleed out. You can actually hear the shoes relax. But you do that a few times until you've got a solid pedal. And even then you have to watch, it'll work some air out of the system later on, but usually you can kind of fiddle around. But dot 3 is bad about absorbing air into the fluid, kind of foaming up. So you kind of got to watch it for a little while and then check to make sure that it's not leaking. But I think that's pretty well got her. It's a done deal. I did take the opportunity while I had the wheel off to grease a lot of the steering and suspension because it's kind of easier to get at them. There's a lot of zerks on these, so that's something you really can't. She's ready to go. Oh, that's good to have that done.